All right, we're going to go ahead and review cell theory. So go ahead, do me a favor, click on which is not a part of cell theory. Right? We've got all cells come from pre-existing cells, cells are the basic unit of life, cells create proteins, or all organisms are made of one or more cells. All right, correct answer here is cells create proteins. That is not a part of cell theory. Okay, so remember, cells come from existing cells, they are the basic unit of life, and all organisms are made of one or more cells. Okay. How did scientists know that all cells come from other cells? Did they look at pond water under the microscope? Did they see that organisms can be one-celled? Did they put living things under the microscope and saw they were made of cells? Or did they see that cells divided to create new cells? Well, they knew that all cells come from other cells because they saw that cells divided to create new cells. They split in half, okay? And how did scientists know living things are made up of one or more cells? Did they find organisms in pond water, create proteins, put living things under the microscope and saw they were made of cells, or saw that cells divided to create new cells? All right, they put living things under the microscope and saw they were made of cells. Okay, awesome. Now that we've reviewed that, we're going to move on to cell parts. So you definitely need your notebook. I know that you've learned about some of the cell parts in 7th grade. We're going to learn some more, and we're also going to review some of the ones that you've already talked about. So our learning target here, I can identify the function of organelles in cells. Okay. All right. Go ahead and write this down. So the job of the cell is to make proteins. That's its whole job. It doesn't matter if it's a muscle cell or a heart cell or any kind of cell. It's going to make proteins. Okay. So go ahead and make sure you write down what a protein is then. A protein is a molecule that makes up many things in our bodies. So they make up our hair, our nails, our eye color. You can see in this picture, these are different types of proteins. Rhodopsin is found in your eyes. It lets you see. Okay. Actin and myosin are proteins that make up your muscles. Insulin, okay, is a hormone. Antibodies give you protection against diseases. Hemoglobin transports oxygen. Lots and lots of different types of proteins. All right, nothing to write down here. In order to make proteins, we need the help of a lot of different cell parts, and we're going to compare making proteins to making cookies. Okay? Take a second. If I want to make cookies, what types of things do I need? Go ahead and list off like 2 or 3 things. So when I usually do this, I get flour, sugar, chocolate chips, baking soda, eggs. But remember, we also need a kitchen and an oven, and we need somebody to mix things and a mixing bowl. There are lots of different things we need, just like there are lots of different things a cell needs in order to make proteins. So these little things that help make all of the different proteins in a cell, these are called organelles, okay? Kind of like you've got little kitchen gadgets, you've got lots of different things that do different jobs in the kitchen. An organelle is a special part of a cell that has a specific job or function. So if we're talking about in the kitchen, a knife has a very different job than a fork, right? We use a knife to cut up stuff, and a fork we use mostly to eat things. So they have a different shape because they have a different function. Same thing in biology. You see all these little guys in here, they have different shapes because they have different functions or jobs. Do me a favor, name one organelle in the cell from the picture below. Just one, there's lots of them there. So you could have listed any one of these: cytoplasm, nucleus, ribosome. These are all organelles. They're all parts that are going to help the cell do its job. All right, write this down. The first thing we're going to talk about are DNA and chromosomes. So DNA and chromosomes contain information on how to make proteins. If you hear people talk about their genes or their genetics, okay, what they're really talking about is their DNA. So the DNA has your genes. So normally when I do this in class, I have the students go ahead and draw some X's inside the nucleus because chromosomes look like X's, okay? So I'll go ahead and draw some here, okay? So here's an X, right? This is our nucleus, the pink guy right here, and then the chromosomes are inside of it. All right, so which item for baking cookies is most similar to DNA or to chromosomes? Remember, DNA and chromosomes have the instructions to make proteins, right? It would be the recipe, right? Because the recipe has the instructions on how to make cookies, okay? Just like DNA has the instructions on how to make proteins. All right, here's our next part. So go ahead, write this down. The nucleus contains the cell's DNA. Remember that was that pink guy that we said where the DNA lives? The nucleus has the cell's DNA, chromosomes, and it directs the cell's activities. That's why I put a picture of a guy who kind of looks like the boss here, right? Well, the nucleus is kind of like the boss. It holds this really important DNA information, kind of controls everything that's going on. Next up, we have the ribosomes, okay? Ribosomes are these little polka dot guys, okay? And the ribosomes are actually going to make the proteins. Remember we said the job of the cell is to make proteins. Well, in order to make proteins, we have to have a part of the cell that's actually going to make the proteins. Those are the ribosomes, the little polka dots, okay? So which would be most similar to the job of the ribosomes? Okay, so remember ribosomes make not make cookies. Ribosomes make proteins. The chef, right? Because just like how ribosomes make proteins, the chef is going to make our cookies. Okay? All right, next up, the endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, go ahead, write this down. Sometimes we shorten it to ER. Okay, I'll put that in parentheses here. Because endoplasmic reticulum is a really long, complicated word to say. If you look here, it's this bluish green. You'll notice one part says rough and one part says smooth. The rough ER has the polka dots on it, the ribosomes. The smooth ER does not, okay? So there's just two different types, and it's going to fold the proteins, okay? So after our ribosome makes the proteins, the ER is going to fold them up, all right? So think of this as like, let's say you're making peanut butter cookies, right? This is the person who's going to roll them in the sugar and press them flat. Or if you're making cutout cookies, this is the person who is going to use the cookie cutter and stamp out all the cookies, okay? All right, then we have the Golgi body. So once the proteins are folded, we've got to package them up, okay? Just like if you're making cookies for the holidays and you want to package them up and send them to somebody, the cell has to package them up. And the reason it packages them is because a lot of times it wants to send them out of the cell. It can't just send them out without packaging them, okay? So the Golgi body, it's another squiggly guy, you can see it here, packages those proteins. All right, we also have the cell membrane. This controls what goes in and out of the cell. It's also called the plasma membrane. So if you hear somebody say the plasma membrane, know that that's the same thing as the cell membrane. So once our proteins are made by the ribosomes, okay, they're folded, they're packaged, okay, then they're going to leave the cell through the cell membrane. The cell membrane doesn't let anything or everything in and out. It decides, okay, so it controls what goes in and out. So which would be most similar to the job of the cell membrane? All right, the door to the kitchen, right? It's going to allow things in and out of the kitchen. All right, next up we have the mitochondria. You might remember learning this as the mighty mitochondria or the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria uses sugar to create energy for the cell. Okay, so in order to make proteins and fold them, we've got to have energy. All right, so just like how you guys, when you eat sugar, you get a lot of energy. The mitochondria uses sugar and creates energy. Mitochondria, here's these squiggly guys. They're little squiggly ovals. And we'll talk about them later when we talk about cellular respiration. So what would be most similar to the job of the mitochondria then? Remember, the mitochondria takes sugar and creates energy. Good, it would be the power plant, right? A power plant's going to make energy for your kitchen and for your stove so you can make those cookies. All right, cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the jelly-like substance and it fills the empty spaces in the cell. So this kind of gross green background, you can think of all of that as being cytoplasm. The reason we need cytoplasm is it kind of holds the organelles, holds these little guys in place so they don't just crash into each other or all end up on one side. It kind of holds everything together. Right? So think about if your mom ever put fruit or marshmallows or something in Jell-O, right? They don't really move. It's kind of like that. It's really watery. It's made mostly of water. It fills the empty spaces. So if we think about the cytoplasm, if we're making cookies, what's similar to the cytoplasm? Remember, cytoplasm fills all the empty spaces in the cell. Yeah, it would be the air, okay? Because air is filling up all the empty spaces in the kitchen. All right, last but not least, lysosome. Okay, this is kind of like our trash compactor, our trash can, garbage disposal. It's going to digest cell waste, so anything we don't need anymore, or invaders. Let's say there's a little bacteria that gets into the cell. It's going to gobble it up. I'm going to show you a little video here, okay, of this guy, okay. So this is a cell, and he's like, oh, I'm going to capture this guy. Cells do this, okay. Not all cells, but some cells. So now this little guy is enclosed in here. And what's going to happen is the lysosome then is going to release some digestive enzymes. Going to release some stuff to basically kill this guy. And eventually they're going to break this little guy apart and use all of his parts for energy or for building blocks for something else. Okay? All right, those are the parts of the cell.